Washington Talk, I'm Eun Jang-cho. Mr. Robert O'Brien succeeds Ambassador John Bolton as the National Security Advisor to President Trump. Meanwhile, presidents of the U.S. and South Korea are meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Today, we'll discuss what all this means to nuclear diplomacy with North Korea.
I think we have a very good chemistry together, and I think we're going to have a great relationship.
We've had tremendous foreign policy successes under President Trump's leadership. I expect those to continue.
정상회담을 통해 한반도의 완전한 비핵화와 항구적 평화 정착을 위한 협력 방안에 대해 협의하고
In the studio with me today, Dr. Jung Pak, Korea Chair at the Brookings Institution. She's held senior positions at the CIA and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Also joining me, Ms. Duyeon Kim, Adjunct Senior Fellow at the Center for New American Security and a columnist with the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. Ms. Kim was previously with the Carnegie Endowment. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
Now, Dr. Park, President Trump named Mr. Robert O'Brien as his new national security advisor and compared with Ambassador Bolton. How would this new appointment impact talks with North Korea?
When we look at some of the trend lines in terms of the appointments that the Trump administration has given over the past 2.5 years, what we see is that a lot of the stronger voices have been pushed out in favor of voices who are more welcoming of the president's, are more willing to go along with the president's preferences. And I see O'Brien as replacing John Bolton, who had very strong feelings about lots of things. And Bolton had not been shy about how he felt about North Korea, about Afghanistan, and about talks with the Taliban. So I think what we see now is probably a more malleable and partner in O'Brien in the White House.
Mm-hmm. And until recently, Mr. O'Brien was with the State Department. So can we expect more coordination between State Department and the NSC? And U.S. media reports that now Secretary Pompeo is in the driver's seat and that he has more running room.
Right, so it remains to be seen. We can speculate and assume perhaps. We've heard that he's good friends with Secretary Pompeo, so that might help. He might defer a lot of, for example, North Korea policy to Secretary Pompeo. But I agree with Jung, and the other factors we have to look out for is, which topics, which issues does he want to take on and make his own and create his own so-called legacy as well, and how much coordination, interagency coordination is he able to bring back, which we've heard Bolton has completely shot. And so these are, and also most importantly, will he be able to get Trump's ear, as we say? How close will he be to Trump? How closely will Trump listen to him? And so these are some factors we'll have to look out for.
So you say he's going to choose which issues he wants as his legacy, meaning that he may not choose North Korea as his prime topic.
We'll have to see. But, it's clear that Secretary Pompeo, that's his portfolio with Steve Biegun. And so perhaps O'Brien might defer to and delegate those issues to the State Department. So all of this remains to be seen.
I think what would be really welcome is if he brought back the interagency processes that had been in place before John Bolton and the Trump administration came in. One of the biggest weaknesses, I think, of policy making is that when the whole of government is not coordinated on a lot of these things. And so if there was one thing that I had a wish list for the new national security advisor is that all of the equities of the U.S. government are taken into account as we make these big decisions about North Korea and in other issues.
Mm-hmm. And after being ousted, Ambassador Bolton said that talks with North Korea are doomed for failure. And President Trump pushed back and said that Ambassador Bolton mentioning of the Libyan model set us back badly. So what does this exchange tell us about?
So on the one hand, I think there's a personal thing there. The president seems to have much more chemistry with the new national security advisor, and the president clearly likes the Secretary of State Pompeo as well. So I think part of that is personal, but the other side is that John Bolton has a long history of not liking negotiations, and that there's very little that can be done with North Korea. But I think diplomacy is part of the point of diplomacy is to figure out what's possible and what's not, and what's impossible. So I think the president is right to continue to focus on diplomacy, but I think, and I think that what's important now going forward is to make sure that everybody's on board with what's on the policy.
And President Trump also said that Ambassador Bolton needs to know how badly they've done in the past, and that it's maybe a new method may be very good. And North Korea's chief nuclear negotiator Kim Myung-gil was very quick to welcome President Trump mentioning a new method. Why do you think is that?
Well, we first have to know what he meant by this new method. In the context of Trump's comments, it sounds like he's saying, no, I don't like the Libya model, and that's music to North Korea's ears. North Korea hates the Libya model because that just means that they give up the nuclear weapons and the United States kills Kim Jong-un, basically. And so, you know, the North Koreans might be making assumptions that aren't there, or perhaps there is something we'll have to see. So this new method, I mean, I'm curious too, but you know, it just opens a lot of speculation whether it means is it going to be a phased approach, is it going to be a big deal? But I really don't think that the fundamental principles in Washington's approach has really changed too much yet since Hanoi.
So in that new comment by Kim, so I think that there's the seeds of miscalculation there again, in the way that in Hanoi, Kim Jong-un came in thinking that he had President Trump in his pocket, and that was not the case. And so I think when Bolton was fired, North Korea had been criticizing Bolton up and down the street, and they've not been shy about saying really nasty things about Bolton and the Secretary of State. And I think that the North Koreans might be thinking again that President Trump is on their side. I see some tactical benefit to that, right? But on the other hand, they might be overestimating how much Trump is on their side, and so that sets us up for a lot of disappointment for North Korea, and a lot of and another logjam if working level conversations actually start.
Reportedly, Chairman Kim wrote a letter to President Trump and invited him to Pyongyang. And President Trump said that we are not ready yet, there are still ways to go. So why do you think he didn't take up the offer this time?
You know, it could be anything. Who knows what goes on in the mind of President Trump, just like Kim Jong-un. But it could be that he's trying to allow working level talks to actually happen in the first place, and I would like to see negotiations function properly, and until now they have not been, and it's really largely because North Korea has not been interested in resuming working level talks. They've been trying to go straight to President Trump, and I agree with what Jung said just momentarily. I think in Hanoi, Kim Jong-un he surely saw firsthand that Trump, Bolton, Pompeo are actually on the same page when it comes to the overall approach and the key principles in their strategy. But perhaps at the same time, the other half of his brain is wishful thinking and hoping he can still lure Trump away from the rest of the bureaucracy, and convince Trump to side with and give Kim Jong-un whatever he wants. And so this new calculation, you know, the North Koreans keep talking about this calculation. They want the calculation to be on North Korean terms and definition.
And Dr. Park, why do you think North Korea made this offer to invite President Trump to Pyongyang at this time? And you were with the CIA and you held senior positions there. Isn't this a big intelligence project if the president's there?
Yeah, if the North Koreans made that comment, I think any kind of symmetry looks good for North Korea. When President Moon went to North Korea last year, and there was that big photo opportunity on Mount Baekdu, which is where the Kim family claims their heritage and ancestry in this mythical place. I think that looked very good for Kim. And also when you're hosting or receiving someone else, you can tweak the optics to make it look like they're paying tribute they're paying this respect to the host, and that they're coming to you rather than you going to them. And I think that might have been, if there was an invitation, that it's more, it could be on Kim's terms. He controls the optics, he controls the cameras, he controls who gets in and takes the pictures, and what everything is said. That provides a lot of power for the host.
Mm-hmm. And in the run-up to the working level talks, presidents of the United States and Republic of Korea are holding a summit on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. How can the two leaders facilitate good working level talks through this meeting?
Well, I think in reality, Seoul is very limited in what it can do directly to help facilitate or help the process. Unfortunately, because of the dynamics between the two Koreas right now, North Korea's been basically treating South Korea like it's subordinate, and it's been criticizing Seoul and Moon for basically betraying their Koreanness, and siding with America, the big bad wolf. And so, in a practical sense, I'm not sure. I don't think President Moon, unfortunately, can have a direct impact. But again, in his discussions with Trump and between the two allies, they can still strategize.
He can't do very much because of sanctions. And I think there's been a stabilization of U.S. South Korea on this issue of how far South Korea should go in terms of offering a basket of goodies. What President Moon can do is to beef up intelligence collection and also collaborate and cooperate with Japan, China. South Korea often has the best insights into North Korea in terms of ground level truth. And so I think that's one way that South Korea can be a huge boost to North Korea nuclear negotiations. On this meeting between President Trump and President Moon, I think at a minimum, we have to have the optics of unity. A lot of smiling and handshaking and making sure that both leaders are on the same page. Because if North Korea knows anything, one of their biggest skills is to divide and conquer. And I think we can deny them that.
What does President Moon want from President Trump at this moment?
Well, based on what we're hearing, quotes carried through the Korean media by Blue House officials and others, it sounds like, of course, North Korea is going to top the agenda, but it sounds like President Moon will want to try to move forward the peace process. And this touches upon what Jung just mentioned. It's in President Moon's personal and presidential interest to try to get sanctions lifted, because that is integral to trying to move forward a peace process. And so that creates a dilemma for Moon, because in order to lift sanctions, as we know, the Trump administration stance is North Korea has to give something very substantial, significant on the denuclearization front. And so that puts Moon really in a difficult position, because it's almost like saying you have to side with one side or the other, go completely all in with North Korea and demand Washington lift sanctions, or side with Washington and try to convince Kim Jong-un to denuclearize or show something very big and bold. And so this is a very tough spot that President Moon is in.
And Dr. Park, South Korea's Special Representative Lee Do-hoon said that North Korea presented many ideas and proposals since the breakdown of the Hanoi summit. Have you sensed anything that's conducive to the talks?
No, I'm not very optimistic, and I'm curious to see what that actually means, that North Korea suggested anything. From my experience, North Korea doesn't have very many good ideas in terms of they talk about security guarantees, they talk about removal of U.S. hostile policy, but when you ask them what that means, it's boilerplate language, and it doesn't mean very much in terms of what is actually actionable. So I'm curious to see how this plays out, if North Korea actually does have a new way of looking at the negotiations. But I think based on how North Korea has been treating the Moon administration, how North Korea has been treating the working level U.S. Folks, I have very little confidence or optimism about North Korea's willingness to actually give something up significant.
Before we go, I want both your opinions. So how can we make real progress in the upcoming working level talks and not just prepare for another summit? summit.
And that's my concern, because North Korea, through the media, has been framing these working level talks as preparation for a summit statement. And that's bad news to me. That shows, or that signifies that they're not prepared for serious negotiations. But really, objectively, we're in a situation where North Korea has to bring something to the table, meaning some ideas. And I'm with Jung, and we hear from former U.S. negotiators over the past few decades saying that everybody else had to come up with ideas for North Korea. They never came to the table, whether it was six-party talks or agreed framework, with a detailed so-called roadmap or a give and take and how this all looks like.
So for working level conversations to actually bear fruit, we're constantly talking about what we can do more of. Let's flip that question around to say, what can North Korea do? And that is bringing their technical people, their scientists to these working level discussions, or actually have negotiators who have knowledge of what's going on the nuclear front. What we've seen, in the course of negotiations or conversations with North Korea over the decades, the foreign ministry are implementers of policy. They're not the ones who are leaning forward and making policy proposals. And so if the foreign ministry folks are coming and the negotiators are coming in with actual knowledge and are empowered to talk about nuclear issues, then that is a great sign. But so far, there's very little to suggest that that's the case, but we'll see what happens.
And we'll have to see what happens. We'll now watch video for our next discussion.
새로운 평화의 시대가 열렸음을 8천만 우리 결여와 전 세계에 엄숙히 천명했습니다.
우리 군대가 정상적으로 진행하는 훈련에 병적으로 반응하는 남조선 군부의 섬약한 심경이 걱정스럽다.
The leaders of the two Koreas signed the Pyongyang Declaration a year ago. It promises to bring down military tensions, foster economic and social cooperation. But much has come to a standstill. Now, Ms. Kim, when President Moon made a speech to 150,000 North Korean citizens in Pyongyang, there was much euphoria. How do you compare the mood back then and now?
Oh, complete opposites. It's almost like we're in a different era, a different age right now. Very chilly, very cold. And this is because North Korea has consistently snubbed South Korea, even blatantly said, we don't want your help, we don't want you involved. And again, this points to the way that North Korea tries to treat South Korea as its subordinate. And it sounded like Pyongyang was partially blaming South Korea for what happened in Hanoi, perhaps suggesting that it was misled by South Korean officials on what could be a possible deal. And it also shows that, but at the end of the day, North Korea really does only care about dealing with the U.S. one-on-one. And so in that sense, it may not be a huge loss to North Korea because they probably already think that if they need to, they can just come back to South Korea and get whatever they want from South Korea, whether it's aid or other assistance.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Park, Pyongyang Declarations covers a range of issues. What has been progress so far?
Some of the landmines have been removed. Some of the guard posts have been removed. But I think, while those are good for tension reduction, let's point to the shorter range ballistic missiles that North Korea has been lobbing since the summer. And some of their blustery rhetoric and how Pyongyang has iced Moon out of any kinds of any significant role in all this. And I see this as, if I had to grade North Korea's strategy in this way, that it's a little bit of a misplay. Moon happens to be North Korea's biggest advocate, and I think that if North Korea were to even signal that they were willing to really have real conversations with the U.S., that treating Moon and working with President Moon on some inter-Korean more additional tension reduction initiatives with President Moon would be a sure sign that North Korea really wants peace. And I think that's where the argument for a peace agreement really gets undercut by what North Korea has actually done, and as well as security guarantees.
And Dr. Park, a 청와대 official said that even with the slew of missile tests, thanks to the spirit of the joint Pyongyang declaration, the conditions are not as hostile as before 2017. Do you agree?
Things are much more stable than they were in 2017. But 2017 was also a series of actions on all sides, right, in terms of rhetoric and actions. And I think that it would be a mistake to say that because North Korea has refrained from long-range ballistic missile testing or nuclear testing, that somehow we have entered this new era of peace and that Kim is really serious about reforming or whatever the case might be.
And Ms. Kim, what can South Korea do to improve relations with North Korea? Obviously, North Korea is not moving, so what can South Korea do?
Well, that's the thing. They don't have a partner right now in the North. They don't want to deal with South Korea. And from the North Koreans' perspective, they're really they would probably dance if Moon and Seoul completely sided with Pyongyang and put as much pressure on Washington as it could to lift sanctions first before North Korea took any serious and significant measures on the denuclearization front. I think that's what they're aiming for right now. But it's also interesting that, before, when we saw the whole euphoria and the symmetry between the two Koreas, it almost, it looked like North Korea was also doing some of its politicking too, and trying to use this whole, at least the symbolism and the look, the appearance of this one Korea, this pan-Korea, united Korea, against the big foreign powers, and we can be strong just between the two Koreas. And it looked like he was going to use that as some in politics. But then now, for some reason, he's decided that he doesn't need to, and he will just deal straight with Trump.
I mean, what has President Moon not done?
Exactly.
He's offered aid that North Korea turned down. He offered, flu medicine that North Korea has put down. He's offered meetings that, no-cost meetings at the liaison office that North Korea has turned down. So, let's look at what President Moon has done already.
So how much are the inter-Korean relations influenced by the U.S.-North Korea relations?
Well, in today's context, they're directly affected by the U.S.-North Korea, the status of that relationship. Well, sure, we've got, so-called bromance between the two leaders, between Trump and Kim Jong-un, but otherwise it's pretty much, we know it's not, on the substantive level, nothing is really happening. And so, perhaps, when we do, if and when there is some sort of sanctions relief, whether it's either on exemptions or actual lifting of sanctions, perhaps we'll see a return to a warming of inter-Korean relations. But for now, it's clear that Pyongyang is trying to separate the two tracks.
And Dr. Park, we have the upcoming US-ROK summit coming up. So can we find an opening for improved inter-Korean relations through that summit?
Look, I think the way that we have an opening for better inter-Korean relations and to nudge North Korea to be nicer to South Korea is if President Trump explicitly linked U.S. Better relations with the U.S. to North Korea having better relations with South Korea. And so far, we haven't really seen that in an explicit kind of way, but I would see that as a strong signal for North Korea that they need to be better.
We'll have to see. Now we'll move on to our next segment. Now time for the photo moment, time to look at an interesting North Korea picture. Today we have a photo of North Koreans riding a cable car to a viewing platform near the summit of Mount Baekdu next to Samjiyon. Every year, more than 100,000 North Koreans go on a study tour to the so-called revolutionary sites on Mount Baekdu, commemorating the Kim family. Now, Dr. Park, what's your reaction?
My reaction to this is it's a beautiful place. It's a great advertisement for tourism. North Koreans are happy. They seem well fed. They're looking at some sort of camera or some personal electronic device. And what it suggests to me that this is the image that North Korea wants to provide for their own people and for the outside world.
Ms. Kim?
Oh, I completely agree with what Jung said. But this has completely not to the point, but it reminded me of my visit to Mount Baekdu and how I thought it was actually very beautiful. And clearly they are trying to portray this happy, modern, advanced tourist attraction for the world to come and see and for them to earn money off of.
Right. Well, on that note, that's all the time we have for this week. Dr. Park, Ms. Kim, thank you for joining us.
Thank
for having
you.
us.
Thank you. And this was Washington Talk from the Voice of America, and I'm Eun Jang Cho. Join us next week for more analysis on North Korea.